students and professors of Reddit, what moment made you want to rage quit college? Got a failing score on a lab report even though me and the rest of the group thought we did everything in the rubric. We went to our TA's office hours later to ask about the score. She basically reversed all subtracted points because she was taking off points for things we had done correctly. The next year one of my lab mates got a grading position with that TA. She admitted to him that halfway through the year she stopped paying attention to the reports and assigned random scores. WTF, this is a college level course for our major. You can't do that. How can a TA be okay with doing that to other students? And how didn't the professor catch on? You would think there would be many complaints from students. Usually when you take any kind of math oriented exam, math, physics, mechanics, etc., you get a pack of problems slapped on your desk and you finish it in the time allotted. So you can generally blow through 90% of a test and get stuck on one difficult part for the remainder or just have that aha moment at the end to squeeze in a few extra points. But this one guy had a bright idea of handing out and collecting each problem at 15-minute intervals. So once the problem was collected, that was it. Even if you figured out the mistake earlier, it was already too late. Hate the prof to this day. I had to write an essay about my feelings studying abroad for reflection. So obviously I made the whole essay then had to resubmit it because that is not how you should be feeling. Misspelled my name in the email. Still makes me really mad. Had an English prof who told me that my personal experience essay about my second boyfriend committing suicide was obviously fake. Switched classes to a different professor after that. Resubmitted the assignment and got a B. Formatting mistakes mostly, since I use LibreOffice rather than paying for Word. Ducking Willy plus for organic chemical homework. When my supervisor decided that I needed to completely rewrite my master's thesis for publication to an angle that was complete nonsense and unpublishable. Feeling this hard right now. How did you manage to get them to let you finish? I've personally never had to do this. But if your PI is being completely unreasonable, go talk to the rest of your committee or even other professors in the department. They should be able to help convince your PI to change their mind. If you find that the rest of the professors in the department agree with your PI, then they are probably right no matter how much you want to think otherwise. First day in a particular finance class senior year. Professor, who here is taking other classes. Pretty much everybody raises a hand. Professor, who here has a job. Most of the class raises a hand. Professor, well, that's a mistake because this class will take you at least 50 hours a week just to pass. I thought he was just trying to be a hardest, but then the guy behind me confirmed that the class would indeed take that much time per week every week just to get by because it was his third time taking the class and he was otherwise an A student. Sorry, I have bills to pay, other classes, and other responsibilities. The time does not exist to put that much time into this class. So I did rage quit. After trying desperately to get through the class for a couple of months. During grad school my research advisor asked me to help out another fellow grad student in their researches. Both of our researches have a lot of experimental parallels. Anyway, I spent good bit of 2 months of summer helping that colleague in her experiments and data, and then my rat told me that I couldn't use any of the data that I ducking helped create. Not only did I lose months of my precious time, but also I got no benefit other than my name being mentioned in a footnote on my colleague's paper. What? Not even co-author credit? What a rip. The time that both my T83 Plus and my T89 died during a final exam. Oh no. I missed a quiz due to a medical emergency and had the documentation of my visit and everything. I emailed my TA. Our quizzes were during discussion sections led by our TAs about making up the quiz. The TA told me to email the professor because it's his class policies. I emailed the professor who then told me to email the TA because the TA is the one who administered the quiz. Shouldered them both and said converse between yourselves and reply all with your answer. I was docked 10% of a final essay because I had the wrong date, so it wasn't following MLA standards. I put the date I submitted instead of the date it was due. I got a 90% on the paper. My SO is working on her master's right now. And a couple weeks ago, the professor added a ducking huge assignment that wasn't in the syllabus. And it wasn't even going to be graded. However, if they didn't do it, it was going to count against their participation grade. A few days ago, he announced that it was actually to try to teach them to stand up for themselves. He wanted the class to tell him the assignment was bullshit. They all failed this little test, apostrophe. What? That's grounds to go to the head of the department, because that's some terrible bullshit. As much as I appreciate fighting the man and questioning authority, this is not the time or place for such a thing, considering many teachers genuinely assign bullshit like that and you the student suffer if you fight back. Two major things really stick out. One, I wrote a optics midterm feeling very confident in getting close to 100. Got my mark back and it was a 30%. I went to go check my exam and saw that the final grade was a 9/30. I looked through my exam and found only one mark wrong. Turns out the tar forgot to put the 2 in front of the 9 on the total mark page 2. For a weekly assignment, a tar took off 50% of your mark if you didn't include a separate cover page, even if you got perfect on the assignment. Oh, and they didn't tell us we needed one until after already submitting the first assignment. I was fairly confident about a final exam I had taken, but when I checked my grade it was a 56. I spoke to the professor and asked him to take a second look, but he refused and said it was obvious that I just hadn't put in the effort. I finally convinced him to recheck it, and it turned out that only one side of my answer sheet had been scanned. My actual grade was a 94. Thankfully he changed my grade to the correct score, but it was still frustrating. When we had to buy $400 textbooks when the previous edition could be bought secondhand for $50. The only difference between the two editions? The order of the practice problems at the end of each chapter. I had to take a discrete math course and the current book was the 7th edition, and it was $400 bucks. First day the prof tells us if we haven't already bought the textbook, don't. The 5th and 6th edition are 100% identical except for the practice problems, and he was assigning homework based on questions he made, not the book. Told us to buy the 5th edition cause it was like $5 on Amazon. I did event management at uni a few years ago. Our lecturer brought in her 8-year-old daughter, who had been a stage show once, to teach us about stage management. Almost all of the class didn't turn up to the next lecture in protest. Just recently bought a $300 loose leaf textbook for math. Now this isn't any higher level math. It's college algebra. Something everyone at my school has to take. Of course it's written by my professor. Of course it changes every year. Took it out of the shrink wrap and saw that the book was 150 pages. Leafed through it and saw that it is literally nothing. There's hardly any information. Like 2 practice problems per topic and a glossary. The real information comes from a $100 access code that has more practice problems and actual information needed to complete the class. So now I'm out $300 on a duckine paperweight and $450 on one general education class. There's nothing that can be done at this point. I can't get a refund. All I can hope for is pawning it off to some unsuspecting student for likely less than half of what I paid for. Now I'm all angry again. Duck you, Professor J. I need to go lie down. You paid $300 for the book and then another $100 for the code. That's harsh. The moment I got massive weekly group assignments that were only worth between 2-3%, we lost half the marks on one question because that page of the PDF submission was sideways. But can't you just press the rotate button on a PDF to straighten it? Unless I use a PDF editor, it just rotates back once I open it in another reader. My advanced foreign language professor dictated that we could not speak English at all during the class, or we would have marks taken away. This was fine, until one day a girl started coughing up blood and we all stopped to make sure she was okay and help her out. Professor took marks off because we spoke in English. I'm still ducking angry. Edit. There were 13 people in the class. All of us disputed this. When we became aware they'd be taken away, we were informed during the next lecture. The lecturer took a voluntary leave of absence. I'm not sure if he's back at the university because I graduated before he could have come back. The language was Japanese. This isn't your average everyday foreign language. This is advanced foreign language. Bleeds in Spanish. I tanked my GPA due to missing half a semester for a health issue. I was allowed to appeal to the dean and basically get my grades tossed. I would have been out the tuition, but my GPA would have survived. However, I had to have all my professors sign off that they agreed the appeal was justified. One professor refused to agree on the appeal and I wasn't allowed to turn it in. My math lab by Pearson. I had a rough term with my math lab, then my next term was with the next level of hell, mastering physics by Pearson. I hope the bastards at Pearson suffer as much as the people that have been forced to deal with their bullshit. I once took a class called the Internet to fulfill a requirement. It taught you how to right click, navigate to websites, and use search engines. This was in 2005. It was also an online course. That was probably the least ridiculous thing about my first college. But it only got worse. I noped out of that school after 1 year. Thank God. I took a course called Companion Animals. No matter what I did, I could not get less than 100% on anything. Missed a test. Make up at home. Unsupervised. 100%. Final project completed in 15 minutes with the glue stick. Poster board and Wikipedia. 100%. It was such a joke. Granted, I thought maybe by finishing the class I could have an animal familiar like a goat or something. Never happened though. I asked a question and the teacher ignored me. Minutes later, a different student asked the same question and the teacher said good question and answered it enthusiastically. The id situation at my undergrad was usually described as a lot of little fixes on an ancient set of software instead of upgrading. At some point, there was a comical little error where all campus services couldn't be accessed, but only from campus Wi-Fi. If you lived off campus, used mobile data, or could go somewhere off campus with Wi-Fi, you could get into campus services. But if you couldn't, very likely in a small town probably only places with Wi-Fi were friends' houses, McDonald's, and Dunkin' Donuts. You were screwed. A professor got mad at us for not doing any online assignments because, well, then why aren't you contacting its services yourselves and having them fix it? You know, like we could contact it and everything would magically go back up and be fixed. Background. There are 2 colleges in my town. One university and one community college. I chose community college because it was cheap. English 101. Write a 3-page creative piece on why you chose this community college. So, not knowing how to stretch it's cheaper than university into 3 pages. I wrote about how I struggled with menial jobs my whole life and wanted a better future for me and my family. I was actually pretty proud of it. Classic overcoming hardship story. Teacher hands it back with a C. Says I didn't answer the question. I flipped. I circled the creative writing portion of the assignment sheet and stapled my graded paper to it and gave it to the department head and dean. The teacher was replaced mid-semester due to medical issues. I assume I wasn't the first one to complain about her. Duck her. All of my graded work added up to an A, but the professor gave me a C because she didn't like my attitude. I went to the dean to contest the grade. He told me that he couldn't do anything about it because I would have her as a professor in the future and didn't want to make things awkward. Instead, he gave me a CD of him playing Presbyterian hymns on the trumpet and sent me on my way. My freshman English professor sexually and emotionally harassed me, both in front of students and when everyone was gone. He failed every one of my assignments, no matter how good they were. Actually, to be more of a dick, he graded them initially as A's or B's, but knocked off a bunch of points for no reason, so they'd end up D's and F's. The worst part is, when I reported him to the dean with all the proof, every email, even fellow peers' testimonials, the dean told me, well, it seems like he's just picking on you, not harassing you. Harassment isn't the word I would use, more like bothersome. He just had twins, so that's probably why he's upset with you. Never had a more frustrating and heartbreaking experience. Good thing now I can't even remember his name. I had a newly hired lecturer who was not long out of university. He was extremely condescending to anyone he perceived to be below his intelligence level, and would try and crowbar the fact he had a PhD into any lesson or conversation he could. A few of us also had marks we considered suspect compared to his favorites. After a fair few disagreements with him, I dropped out, as did a couple others not long after. I'm still in contact with a couple people in the group. Turns out he was dismissed after the first year. Hey, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.